change up here for live stream things. If there's anyone outside of the frame right now that could go check if I'm in the frame on the other camera, would that be possible? I just got 2 no's. No one can check any of this. Oh well. Oh well. Don't mind me, I'm just going to finish putting on my incredibly bright key. So we had a question prior to starting today that I'll go into a little bit more. And if there are other questions, I'm happy to do a little bit, let's say, less formal format. This probably come from the same root word. Less formal format. If there are other questions or if there are other positions or techniques or concepts or ideas that folks want to take a look at, happy to do that. Just to get that ball rolling. I know that some of you are doing more of a straight-on viewership. Some of you are doing some solo drills. Some of you are with partner. And so, we can investigate how to make the most of that time. Happy to look into that as well. But I didn't want to answer the question that I got before we started today, and then maybe find some other things to go into after that. So, is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, more about killing the leg when you pass butterfly. The leg that presses the ground, not the hook. Okay, so what I think this question is referring to is if I'm in a double knee position here, and it's actually trying to hit it like this. Sean has 2 butterfly hooks right now, but when he goes to attack on me, he's probably going to be motivated to switch from 2 butterfly hooks to 1 butterfly hook on me, and then 1 that's on the floor. That will support his attempts to sweep me and lift me up into the air. So if he has an underhook, let's say, and he gets control of my arm here, you can see that it would be this leg that I'm pointing at now that would end up pushing off the ground, and then the other leg goes and sweeps me, and I lose the ball and I get swept. And that's not good for live streaming because you lose a lot of credibility if that happens. So there's a few ways we can go about killing this. The simplest way is to directly oppose them, putting that foot to the floor. Okay? So if Sean is going into a hook sweep here and I get a hold of his knee, I can keep his knee off the ground like this. Now it's going to be hard for him to sweep to that side. Okay? The thing you want to be aware of as well is that this will stop people from heisting up on you, pulling this leg back. Okay? Now that also is useful because if you can't get up, I've eliminated 2 dangers. One is the heist and one is the hook sweep. The caveat here is he has this leg is easily going to become a butterfly hook for sweeping on the other side. So I do need to be aware that I'm not giving him an easy trap on my arm like this. If he's overhooking my arm here, like this, yes, now the holding this leg is not really going to help me out because he can easily knock me over to the other side. Okay, so once you have this grip and you've killed the support leg, if your partner has any idea what's going on, they're not going to just hang out like this while you pull their leg off the ground. So what you want to do is, 1, pick the leg up and stop them from using it to sweep you by pushing on the ground, and then develop some sort of threat that causes them to go into a defensive position instead of continuing with their offense. Okay, so there's a few different ways you can do that. One of them is if I hold on to this leg here and I'm able to take my other hand up and around and grab a hold of his back, then I might go towards this side in essentially what is a long step guard pass. So I would pull his head towards me and bring my hip down to the ground. Now I've pulled this leg with me the whole time. I could then go into a knee weave. Let's actually turn on it. Where, if you recall from the other day, we differentiated between this knee weave position here and a flank position. I can pretty easily get into a knee weave from here. For those of you that were not tuned in the other day, this is a knee weave here. If I were to switch, so I'm in a position like this, and my support leg is behind Sean, now this is more of a flanking position where I can threaten to go to his back, and I can also go to the side control. Okay? So that's another way of using a grip to stop them from putting the support leg on the ground. And then from there, you can go about passing with things like a long step. The other thing you can do is to step over the leg to stop them from using it. But you want to be aware that if you do that, you have to be careful about going too far to one side because that can often get you into some danger there. So what I mean is if I'm here with Sean and I go holding this leg here and maybe I'm able to off balance him slightly, getting his head behind his hip, and I'm able to pommel to an underhook. Okay, we've looked at this a little bit before. Keep in mind, even though I have the underhook, if Sean is doing what he's doing now, which is to hold onto my belt, it's not impossible for him to sweep me still. Okay, so I do have to be pulling this leg off the ground. Once I get this underhook, I could hold his belt, I could hold around his shoulders, I bring my knee to the center line, right at his tailbone. Now what I'm looking to do is step back and over the leg so that now my knee is blocking his knee, so it's not really realistic for him to use that to push off the ground and sweep me. But that changes if I drift across the center line like this. Now the butterfly hook takes effect on my leg and I can be off balanced here. Okay, so in general, if I go over his leg, I either want to pommel so that I've got a shin staple on him like this, or going into a knee weave with the other leg, or I want to be ready to go towards the butterfly hook. Okay, it's dangerous for me to, with or without a hook, to just continue moving away from the butterfly hook. Okay, but it's pretty safe to take the leg that's being hooked back here and move it down to the floor and put my knee on the mat. Now from a position like this, I might take an underhook on the near side and then go into a cross knee pass to the far side. Okay, so let's look at that again. We'll do it from this angle right here. Okay, so Sean comes in, he gets started with an underhook on one side. I get started taking his support leg off the ground on the other side. Maybe I've been able to push his head behind his hip. Now I pommel in and I get a good grip on one side. I step back and over his knee and I put him down to the floor. Now from this position, I don't want to go away from the butterfly hook. Instead, I'm going to go underhooking his arm, and then from a position like this, I can pop up and cross knee pass to the other side, and then from here, we get a good guard passing situation. Okay, so that's a couple of ways to deal with that butterfly hook out of a double knee position. But that's, and also keep in mind that you don't have to stay in a double knee position. Hello, dear viewers. As you can tell, we are getting into the evening and the sun is right at my eyeballs. So ignore any lighting problems that we might be running into. When we are working against a butterfly guard and I'm in a double knee position, I don't necessarily have to stay there. If I go there to get rid of his spider guard or to get rid of whatever he happens to be doing to attack me, I can go back out of there and go into a long range pass, bullfighters, things like this. So I'll give you an example of this because oftentimes you kill the butterfly sweep, you've killed the hook sweep, then you want to back out of there and go back to outside position and go into your attacks from there. Okay, so an example of that would be we come in to a double knee position here, and however it happens, I'm pulling his support leg off the ground on this side, and now I realize, okay, he's not going to be able to hook sweep me, but I am having trouble getting past his butterfly guard, so I might go back and away from him, and then from the outside position, push his knee to the ground, go around the corner, and either end up in a bullfighter pass or some follow-up thereof. Okay, so these are just some examples of how you can deal with how you can use the support leg to neutralize their butterfly guard and their hook sweep, and then move forward into your actual guard pass. And that's a very specific way to approach somebody's butterfly guard. You don't always have to kill the support leg and then stay on the support leg for the entirety of the pass. It's just that the main attacks that come out of Sean's butterfly guard here are the hook sweep and the hip heist. So I need to be alert to that, and keeping the support leg off the ground is a good way to do it. Okay, but that doesn't mean I have to pass his guard out of this double knee position holding the support leg. You could just as easily back up and away and then start a circle step and come down to the floor. There's 1,000 different ways you could go about this, and it's going to come down to how your partner likes to play guard, what their strengths are, and what your strengths are as a guard passer. Okay? So I hope that answers that question. I was thinking maybe today we would actually change gears briefly and go into a review of some of the other attacks that we like to use. I was trying to think of some things that you might be able to do with your partner that don't require as much space. And one of them is reviewing how we like to break somebody's grip when we're trying to finish an arm lock. Okay, this is a good one to practice. and it helps us stay alert to working towards a mechanical advantage when it comes time to separate someone's arms and finish an arm lock. Okay, so let's have a look at that now. So let's say we've done a good job. We've done a good job passing our partner's guard, and we've managed to get into a position where we're going to finish an arm lock here. Okay? We'll go over a little bit about how you might get into this position in a moment, but let's take a look at what's going on here and how I might separate his arms and actually finish. Okay? So the first thing is I'm going to take my hand that's near his head, and I'm going to lace it through his arms and grab a hold of my own thigh. Okay? I'm going to have one arm that's free and down here, able to access his legs and grip onto them. Okay? I've got a torso leg that covers his body, and I've got a cross-face leg that covers his head. In general, what I want to do is pull both of my heels right to my butt so that I cover both of his ears, one with my heel and the other with my hip. I take my torso leg and I pull my heel into his shoulder here. Okay? This gives me a good starting position for the arm lock. Okay, you'll see that when I'm doing this, I'm pointing my knees down towards Sean's knees, like this, and not dead set with symmetrical legs here. Okay, so we tilt the knees down towards our partner's knees. Okay, now some of you will remember that the first thing Sean will probably do here is shuffle away from me. And as he shuffles away from me, I just use my hand on the floor to follow him. So he shuffles away and I shuffle after him. The next thing he'll try and do when he realizes he can't slip his elbow out of here by just shuffling is he'll attempt to come up on top. Okay, when he goes to come up on top of me, he's got to scissor his legs in order to get up. And if he can do that, then he's out of here, or he's at least on top of me. Okay, so what we want to do is use an outside scoop on the near leg when he goes to come up. So I might be down on an elbow or a hand here, and then Sean is shuffling away from he shuffles away from me. Then he goes to scissor his legs to come up. When he goes to come up, you'll see there's a moment when his legs scissor over top of each other, and then he can go ahead about coming on top of you. Okay? So while that's happening, I want to be looking for a scoop grip here on the near leg. Okay? If I hold on to this scoop grip, when Sean goes to get up on top, he'll make it maybe up to about here, and then we can always put him back down to the ground. So I'm going to open up my cross-face knee, put him back down to the ground, and then we're ready to keep going with the arm lock. Okay, so the first movement is shuffling, the second movement is scissoring. He goes to scissor to get up on top of me, and I hold onto the knee here, and I use my cross-face leg to put him back down to the floor. Okay, the way we do it is to open up at the knee, and we repin our partner back down to the floor. Okay, so let's turn it up. So from this arm lock position, we can use an outside scoop on the near leg in order to stop the person from scissoring and actually getting back on top. Okay? You could also use an inside scoop on the near leg. An inside scoop like this, well, let's actually come a little bit closer. Here. An inside scoop on the near leg will also stop people from scissoring to get on top of you, and can be useful for keeping control of this position. Then we start looking at the scoop grips on the far leg. Okay? And on the far leg, a lot of times what we'll use is an outside scoop here to draw the legs in towards us. Okay? The reason you might use this scoop grip on the far leg is because you need to replace your cross-face leg. Okay? A lot of times when you're in this position, you've got your cross-face leg set, but your partner has this grip here, and they're using their support arm to interfere with your cross-face leg. It might be by pushing at the knee here. A lot of times it will be by swimming their hand inside like this, so that as you go to finish your arm locking positions, and if you're unintentionally just pulling on the arm like this, and they clear that leg to some degree, now they can potentially get up. Okay? So a few ways we can deal with this. One of them is I can pull that hand out of there. I'll go over that another time. But the one I want to focus on now is to use this outside scoop here to pull his legs towards me. Now I cover his lower back. I make sure my torso leg is pulling heel to butt. Then I can easily remove my cross-face leg and climb up and over top of him. It's important when I do this that I take my knee right to where his ear and shoulder get covered. Okay, so I don't want to come up like this, where my knee is far away from his ear. I want to use the scoop grip to pull myself close. I pull my heel towards his shoulder, then I take my knee and I cover his shoulder and his ear. Now from this position, I'm going to go back to a scoop grip, put my shin on the floor, and put my head on the floor. Now I can replace my cross-face leg going over the top, or the shin will go behind the head and pin the head down. Okay? There's going to be different times to use these two positions.
If I go over the head, I can go forward or I can go backward to finish. A lot of times what will happen is Sean will start resisting to his right, and that will send me down to the floor here.
And we end up right where we started. And this is probably the simplest version of this drill that we're looking at. So I go here and I take an outside scoop on the legs. I might be doing this because he's interfering with my crossface leg, so he's swimming his hand inside here. So I take off the crossface leg and I climb up and over his body and I put my knee right where his ear and his shoulder are, so they're both covered. I bring my shin to the floor, my head to the floor, and I reach back for that first scoop grip down by his legs. Now I pass my crossface leg over the top here, and now if my partner does move around, it's pretty easy for me to finish the arm lock. Sometimes you'll get to this position and your partner's head will start to come up so that you can't get your leg over the top. In these cases, we just want to use the shin behind the head, and I pull and turn down towards his legs, and I pull his two legs across my body. Now I sit up with him, I put that crossface leg back over, and we're in a position to finish the arm lock. Okay? So I'm going to go over this again, but this is a nice drill to cover the top portions of the arm lock, where you climb back up over your partner, and then once you've climbed back up and over them, you can replace your crossface leg, and then you might go about separating their arms and finishing the actual lock. Okay, so again, we're here, and we've got the pin started. My partner's got his hands locked up in a good grip, and he's got his hand underneath my knee trying to interfere with my crossface. So I tilt my legs to the side, always pulling my heels to my butt. I make sure my hand starts off on the floor, helping support my position. Now from this position, I'm gonna go to his far leg, draw them both in. My elbow goes over his back. I remove my crossface leg, and I punch myself up and over. I put my shin on the ground, and I put my head on the ground. We reach back for the scoop. Now I can go shin behind the head, or if his head is a little bit low, I can go right back into my crossface leg. I turn my shoulder down to the floor, I pull everything in close, and I sit up and over my partner. Okay? And then from here we can look at separating the hands and actually finishing. When it comes time to separating the hands, you generally want to take your partner's arm across your chest, okay, so that you're either putting them in what's effectively an Americana or a Kimura. In general, in class, I've been showing that we should take them to more or less an Americana, but we'll look at how we can use more or less a Kimura to actually separate the grips as well. So what's going on here is we've already got our partner in an arm lock position. He's got everything locked up tight like this. When you want to separate someone's arms, it's not a good idea to pull in a straight line here, because look, his whole body will just move on the floor before I actually break his grip. So we want to avoid being in an arm lock position and going back in a straight line like this, okay? That at first, the problem is that I can't actually separate his arms. The other problem is it helps him with the things he wants to do to defend, whether it's interfere with my crossface leg or scissor his legs. There's nothing good that happens when I pull back in a straight line to separate his arms. Instead, what I want to do is I want to get his arm into a position like this here, or like this here. Because once this happens, it's very hard for him to hold on to his grip. He's just using the back of his shoulder to hold on. So he's got his arms locked up here. I come in, I get my arm locked up with his. I pull my heels towards my butt, and now I'm gonna switch so that my left arm is in now, my right arm is gonna come in, and there's gonna be some overlap where I've got two arms punching through. I make sure that I secure my hand before I release my left arm. Once I've done that, I'm gonna go right back in, and I'm gonna go elbow to wrist with what was before elbow to elbow. So I've got right elbow to his elbow, and I've got my other arm going up to his wrist. Now what I wanna do, since I know this is flipped around, but this is Sean's right arm, so I wanna pull his right elbow towards my right hip bone, okay? So always match up the arm you're attacking with the same corresponding hip bone, okay? So I've got his elbow moving towards my hip bone. Now I take my other elbow and I go up to his wrist. What I wanna do now is go from knees pointing to his knees to knees pointing over his head. So we went from a position like this, I go through, and now I go over the top. I'm looking to get my hand to my own shoulder, and if ever possible, my elbow outside of my thigh. So we go here, I pull everything in close, and if ever possible, I'll take my elbow over my hip like this. Now that I've got his arms separated, I can go back and straighten out the arm. I pull my heels to my butt, and now I bring everything in close, and I take his palm across my center line, so I'm pulling with my right, so that his elbow stays lined up with my hip, and that elbow pulls down. Now my left hand will push his hand down here, and we get a good finish. Okay, so we match up their elbow to the same side hip, we turn the palm up, we pull across the center line, my one elbow will go down, and then my other elbow will go high so that I can get a push and pull here. And then we get a nice strong finish with the arm lock. Okay? Alternatively, we could go from this position here, and I could go down towards his legs to separate his arms. So I might go elbow to elbow, elbow to wrist, and now I take everything down across the body. I've got to be certain of my cross-face leg positioning so his head doesn't come up. Then I separate everything away, and we can come up to the hand. I keep his elbow to my hip, and we go into our finish. Okay? Either way, whichever one you use, you want to get their forearm across your chest like this, here or here. And this is going to make it easy to separate the arms and actually go to a finish. Okay, so we have our arm lock in position. Everything's ready to go. I've already managed my pin. He's not getting out of here anytime soon. And now it's time to separate the arms and go to a finish. So I could come in and I could go elbow to elbow, elbow to wrist. And if my right arm is at his wrist, I'm going to go to my right. If I switch into a position like this, so that my left elbow ends up going to his wrist, then I would go to my left. And as I go to my left, I'm trying to take everything up and overhead, then across my chest. I keep his elbow close to my hip, I straighten out my body, and then we can push and pull to get into a finish. Okay? Now, with that in mind, we can incorporate a full movement drill where I get to practice the top position for the arm lock, and then the bottom position of the arm lock from the closed guard. So I'm in this good position here with the arm lock. I go outside the legs and I pull them in. I go over his back and I remove the cross-face leg. I climb up and over his body. I put my shin on the ground and my head on the ground. I scoop inside the legs. Then I replace the cross-face leg either with a shin behind or my cross-face leg going over the top. I turn all the way over and I carry him through until I end up back where I started with a good cross-face position with my leg. Now we go through, we switch, we separate the arms. Once the arms are separated, we can finish in a good position here. Then we go a second repetition, but this time I'm late and Sean gets all the way up on top of me. Scissors his legs, he comes up. I'm going to practice reaching for a scoop grip on the outside leg. So I go elbow to knee, and I practice putting him back down to the floor, and then I bring his legs back in again, climb up and over, and I put my head to the floor, scoop the legs, replace the cross-face leg, and make another turn to come up and over the top. Okay, so we'll reset so you can see all that again. So we're working on arm lock, controlling the cross pin position for the arm lock, whether that's because he's made his way up on top, or I'm already on top and I need to replace my cross-face leg. These scenarios will come up all the time when you go through your arm lock position. Okay, so we're in, and the first movement now is Sean actually does make it up on top of me, he scissors his legs and comes up. Okay, from this position, I go to his leg, I go elbow to knee, and I put him back down to the floor. I go to the far leg, pull it in, elbow over his back. I remove the cross-face leg, I climb up and over, my head down to the floor, my shin down to the floor, and we scoop the legs again. I put my knee over the top of the cross-face, I make another turn, and pull. I make sure that I don't run into the camera, and then I can go through and separate the arms. Oh, we get some nice detail here. We go elbow to elbow, elbow to wrist, then I take everything, hello again, everything up and over, and I bring his elbow towards my hip as I pull for the finish. So that's just a quick review of the cross pin and how you might manage the bottom position, the top position, when it's time to actually finish. I want to go over a few references here so that we're on the same page with the different forms of the cross pin and also some of the key elements that you're looking for when you're trying to control somebody and maybe when you go on bottom or when you go and you finish on top. Okay, so Sean, can I borrow you one more time? I won't have you. Lie down. Cool. So when we go for an arm lock and we're on top here, and again, I'll go over a couple of ways that this might come up from our guard passes in a moment. But let's just say we've made it into this position. How is this going to end up? Let's actually turn this way a little bit. If Sean goes up on top of me here, what I want to be sure of is that when he goes up on top, that my cross-face knee stays up high above his ear, if ever possible. If I can, I want to get it behind his head. But if I just went to the bottom position and I was on top, I'll probably be able to get to his ear, maybe not a lot higher. So I want to make sure my cross-face knee stays high above his ear, and then what was my torso leg is going to go towards the back of his head so that I get him moving to where his head is pointed. Now when I go to scoop the leg, it's pretty easy to put them back down to the floor. Again, if he comes up on top, I want to make sure that I keep my cross-face knee as high as possible. Okay? A good way to test this is get your leg in position, get your other leg in position, let go of your grip, and have your partner start standing up on you. If you got it set, you're going to be picked up off the floor like this. Okay? So then once we test that out, then I can put him back down to the floor, and we can continue with our drill. This is a really good reference to keep in mind, because if you can ever get that cross-face leg above the ear, you can arm lock the person from the bottom position. Okay? Then we go through, and we start separating the arms and finishing. Okay? So that's a good rule of thumb to use when you're trying to practice your arm locks, and you end up going to the bottom position. Get that knee up above their ear, and they're going to have a hard time posturing out and away. I just want to go over now a few different forms of the cross pin in case you're scouring for other instructionals and whatnot, and you come across some of these references, you'll sound very hip because you know what all these are referring to. So have me lie down, John. So for the most part, you're going to hear this called a cross pin, a Juji-Gatame. You'll hear this called a full Juji-Gatame position. Okay, and this one here would be a quarter. Okay, so I've got one cross-face leg but no torso leg. This position, it's pretty hard to actually finish somebody because he can go into a turning escape where he moves his legs away from me and he starts to turn over, and it's hard to finish here. Unless, can I have separate arms? Unless you happen to get into this position and you have an overwrap grip like this. If you have an overwrap grip, you can finish the arm lock without the torso leg. And so this would be a full, and this would be a quarter. This would be a half Juji-Gatame where I don't have a cross-face leg. We go through this half position when we use that outside scoop here, and we pull the legs in and climb on top. Okay? So those are not all that common. The full Juji-Gatame is the most common one. You're not going to go through a lot of the quarter or the half, but a very common one, a very powerful one is the 3/4, where I take the torso leg, and let's say Sean's got his hands just palm to palm or hand over hand like this, and there's some space between his hands and his chest. You can often thread your leg in and put two cross-face legs in position. So the cross-face leg that was on top, it will stay on top here. Now, if I were to separate his arms at this point, it's a very, very strong arm locking position. In addition, even if he does interfere with my cross-face leg and he does take it off the head, here, I can just grab his elbow, encourage him to come up, and then I put my knee behind the head and we work our way into a triangle. Okay, so this would be a 3/4. And this is a very good position for finishing arm locks. It also leads into things like a triangle. Okay, so a very powerful way to work. You can go into a head scissor like this, where I've got a cross-face leg, and what was in the 3/4 position here and here now becomes a head scissor 1 and 2. This gives you a much higher fulcrum with your hip, and so the finishes from here are very powerful. Okay, again, it's a bit of a specialized arm locking position, but it's good to know that this is what it's referring to. Another one is a shoulder triangle, and this often comes up when people are turning away from you. Okay, so let's say that I've managed to separate Sean's arms here, and he realizes, okay, my arm's getting straightened out a little bit, like this. And then he starts turning away. And when he does that, he's trying to get his elbow to go across my hip. So he wants his elbow over here and not over here. So when this is happening, if he does make it, if he does get his elbow to here and away from the hip bone where it should be, it's hard to just yank somebody's arm back and across. So we pull everything in, and as his elbow goes across, I'm gonna lock a triangle here. So now when Sean goes to turn away, his elbow ends up by the hip bone that I want. And now I can pull and finish right here. Okay? So we can use a shoulder triangle to get the hip high if they happen to be going into a turning escape. So I'll demonstrate that one again. If you get a chance, don't do it now because we're live streaming, but later, when other folks are live streaming, you can look this up. This is when Gordon Ryan faced Craig Jones in one of the EBI finals. Craig Jones ends up putting Gordon in an arm lock, but doesn't finish it. And then I believe Gordon is able to finish his arm lock when they switch roles. And the make or break right there is this shoulder triangle position. Okay, so can I do that one more time, Chad? So it's a very sort of specialized arm lock. It comes up when you've separated someone's arms and they're having a very hard time turning in, so they decide that turning away might be the best way for them to try and escape. And so as they make the turn here, we take our legs and we make a triangle. If I'm going after my partner's right arm, I want to organize my triangle so my right hip bone is high, like this. Then I hook my shoelaces to his shoulder blade and I pull his elbow directly against my hip. Okay, he could make it all the way to here and it doesn't mean anything. You're going to get the finish in this position. Okay, because my hip bone is right against his elbow, so as I pull, you get a strong arm lock in that position. Okay, so again, very specialized arm lock, but I know you guys want to be hip. You want to know all the cool trending arm locks, and that's one of them. Shoulder triangle, okay? Very powerful arm locking position. This whole section of arm locking comes up and relates to our guard passing because of the knee weave position. Okay, a lot of times when you get into a knee weave and you start winning that battle for the pin, you're going to be able to get opportunities to go into different kinds of arm lock. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate that from a knee weave now, and then we might work backwards and look at how to get into a knee weave. So if we're here, and however we do it, we've made it so that one knee is woven in here. Okay? Once I'm in this position, I've got one leg that's stepped outside, and Sean's shins are pointed at my support leg. This is different from a flanking position where Sean's knees and shins point to empty space and my support leg is behind him. So I'm flanking him from the rear. But in this position, I've got a knee weave and his legs are pointed at my support leg. Okay? When we have a knee weave, the priority is to separate the head and upper body from the lower body. Okay, so I might do that via crossface, via crossbody grip and head positioning. It might happen in part because I've got an underhook on him, but in some way, shape, or form, I need to get his head away from his knees. Okay, some options to work with are, again, crossbody grip and head position, but a lot of times that gets shut out because they get an inside bicep tie here. And again, right in this knee weave position, one of my big advantages is that I've got my two arms and my head to work with. Sean has two arms to work with, but his head doesn't have the same utility as mine. My head can help separate his, but his head is basically a liability right now. Okay? So I've got this grip, and I'm trying to bring my head to his head. Sometimes this frame will get in your way. Okay, so you're trying to bring your head in, you're trying to pommel in. Sometimes you'll go pommeling, you'll be able to get that head right back into position. Other times it's not gonna happen. You go to pommel, they go to pommel, and sometimes you'll pommel in again, and you have to move their head without even having a grip. You just have your elbow in contact with them. Sometimes, if your partner's very tall, you'll just have your hand against them. Okay? But however it happens, you end up separating their head from their legs. You put a knee in the pocket of the hip, and then I start making my way up into the mount. Now, if we come right from where we just were, this arm used to be a frame. So often it's raised up ever so slightly as you get into this position. So we can come right in with the elbow to elbow position and start crossing their arm. And this will give us good opportunities to set up an arm lock. remember from Sean's perspective, he was framing because of the threat of the knee weave, but if I do get to the mount, he'll always be looking to take his elbow inside of my knee like this. Okay, if he can do this, I want to be able to cross face him and take his elbow away from my inside of my knee, but this is often the exchange that's now coming up. He wants his elbow inside my knee, and he needs to avoid having his elbow up high like this because I can go elbow to elbow, cross his elbow against the center line, and now he's in all kinds of trouble. Okay? And that can happen on either side. I've got my knee weave set up here, bringing my knee inside, I step up and over, I start going after Sean's head here, whether it be cross-body grip with head position, or a standard cross-face, or some combination of those two with my underhook on the far side. Whatever it happens to be, I'm able to start separating his head from his legs. I bring my knee down to the floor, and now this time I go underneath on the near side with an underhook. Now I have double elbow to elbow position, and I climb his two arms up and over. Now I take my knee back into the position we just came from. Take my knee here to where it's past his head, covering his ear and his shoulder. I kickstand my leg so that I'm propped up nice and strong against with my left leg here. Now my head goes past 12 o'clock, and I circle my right leg all the way around. Don't worry, I'll show this from a different angle in a second. We climb everything together. I get a hold of his arm. We scoop, we cross face, and then we can continue on through into our arm locking position. Okay, so let's go. This time can I have your head right here, Sean? So looking at this from another angle, I won't be able to make sure that I'm in the frame, so I'll trust that you'll let us know if I deviate. Okay, so we're in. I've got my knee woven into his knees. I manage to get underneath on one and the other side, and I start separating upper body from lower body. I bring my knee to the pocket of the hip, and I climb up to the mount. Now I keep elbow to elbow position, and I bring my knee up past his head, covering his ear and his shoulder. My right knee will circle around. Now, a good way to play this position is that in this position, I've got an elbow and knee connection, my right elbow and my knee. As long as those work close together, it's very hard for your partner to get out of this position. If, on the other hand, I separate here, there can be some potential problems. Now, I've got Sean's elbow pretty locked up here, but if he were to start drawing his elbow down and slip out of here and there's separation, now his elbow can go inside my knee. And as we saw, that's basically what he needs to get out of here. So I want to reinforce my elbow position with my knee position so that my knee is not separate from my elbow like this. My knee and my elbow will move together, and then I circle my leg over and I start grabbing onto the arm. I pull my heel to my butt, and I put my shin on the floor, my head on the floor, and we're right back where we were just practicing from. I cross-face leg over the top, and I could either go back or forward and pull him through. Oh, there you are. Until we're in position. There it is. There's my other leg, and there's Sean, and we can start going into our finishes. Okay, if I get any closer, we will not be live streaming anymore, so I'm going to back up a little bit. Okay, so this is a nice drill that you can do where you go through the arm lock position on top. We briefly looked at the arm lock position from the bottom. You do want to gain experience moving from top position and bottom position to arm lock. And then just a couple of the references with regards to what are the various types of cross pin. Juji-Gatame means cross pin. What are the different forms of it? There's a full, quarter, half, three-quarter, head scissor, and a shoulder triangle. There's other variations of them, but it's probably enough for the moment. This will come up a lot of times when you're passing someone's guard and you get into a knee weave. And you get to the mount by separating their head, and now you have opportunities to attack their arm. This is a good way to finish off some of the guard passing that we've been doing. The next thing I want to look at, if we don't have any questions, is reviewing how we can open up a closed guard and get into some of the stances we've been looking at from our guard passing, and then go about actually passing someone's guard. But before that, I'm going to get a drink of water, so I'll be right back. Sean, do you want to come right here and answer tough questions? Yep. Great. We had you didn't see this, and I just made it up, so it's just being made up right now. But Sean agreed to answer your toughest questions right now, so your toughest questions, not your most preposterous ones.
It'd be helpful if I was more entertaining. Was there a second question that was from before this started? Were there two questions, or was it just
I like this
Is that really the time?
I don't even know what day it is, let alone the time.
Dear viewers, I do drink water when I go out of the frame, but I usually sit outside the frame for a lot longer than I need to. But I'm back. So I know you guys. Time flies when you're talking about cross pins, doesn't it? Were there any questions so far?
No, but when we were talking about arm locks, our Jake Crespin said, Jacob said, if I have any questions, he's got me.
Oh, yeah? R.J. Crespin said, if I have any questions, Jacob's got me. Very good.
Jacob said that.
Yeah. Well, Jacob does have a good cross pin. He knows all. Jacob, I'm sure, could go over everything I just went over. Maybe not some of the variations of the cross pin, but I'm pretty sure everything else, he's got it down pat. Yeah.
Got a question for Sean from Kaivi Lehman Verified.
Next.
Gosh, that's exactly.
Okay, it's for Sean though. Go ahead.
Sean, how much better will you be than all of us when we come back because you're taking privates every day from Tim?
I'll answer it first, and then
That's perfect.
he's already so much better than you. How would you measure this? How far is Pluto from us? Oh, Neptune also far. How do we know if it's far away? Sean, go ahead.
No, that was perfect actually.
Follow-up
Yes.
question from Kaivi Verified. What are
Can we
good
mute people?
what are good exercises to do to keep grip strength?
Oh,
It's actually
wow, okay. Well, a good exercise you can do are variations of a hang. I'm guessing that most of you don't have Olympic rings set up, but because there's some right over here, I'll demonstrate it on the rings really quickly. But you can do this on a bar. You can do it if you can convince one of your loved ones to wear a gi and you pull them up off the floor when they wear the gi. That's a fine way to do it. I'll just demonstrate one really quickly because it's a nice way to work. So let's say, oh, this is going to be. Okay, so one way you can work your grip strength is, I'll be right back.
back to you, Sean.
To take a lacrosse ball like this, hold it in your hand, and hook your wrist through the bar. So you're essentially forcing yourself into a false grip. So I might go from here up to here. Okay, and I just hold my wrist forward. You can also assist like this and hold on to your own hand, but by holding this ball here, you get a nice false grip position here. Okay, alternatively, you can bring your feet up and hold yourself in a position like this. If you're on a bar, on a straight bar, you can just bring your toes up towards your hands here. But if you've got rings, you can come all the way up and then hook your feet in, and you're in a good position. Hey, you're more upside down than usual over there. I would say that hangs where you're moving around are probably the best way to retain and improve grip strength that applies to jiu-jitsu, because it's not so much how much weight can you hold in your hands, it's how can you organize your movement when someone's trying to get away from your grip. And you need to be able to stabilize whatever grip you have, not just hold something statically, but walking around with something heavy or suspending your body weight from your grips. The big reason I like the rings or holding a ball in your hand is it forces you to make a false grip. And this right here is so much different than this. Okay, there's an entire world of difference between this kind of grip and this kind of grip. And a lot of times when people lose a grip or their grip gets broken, it's because they were in a position like this, and then their grip starts getting compromised and straightening out, then the fingers open and the grip is gone. But people tend to fight at this point when the grip's already broken basically, and they don't fight so much here. What you need to do is fight to get this kind of positioning and not allow it to get to this kind of position. Okay, so hangs and suspending your body weight or holding a ball in your hand to force that position is a good way to work on it. And if I go like this, my hand looks enormous. Look at that, if I just move it closer to the camera. Anyhow, that wasn't the question.
And
So, were there other questions?
stuff they could do, you were saying with stuff they have at home?
Stuff they have at home. Oh yeah, if you have, it's generally referred to just as a farmer's carry, where you just hold something in your hand and you just walk around. That's probably better than just picking something up and holding it and standing still, because when you're walking, you're forced to stabilize your grip, and you're forced to use the rest of your body to reinforce the positioning of your grips. Another way you can do this is if you have a partner and pulling on their gi. I'm sure you guys have seen this kind of thing before. If I have Sean lying down here, I can do a fairly simple version of this where I hold onto his sleeves, okay, and I just pull my elbows to my hip. This is pretty easy to do, especially if you're anywhere close to each other in height and body weight. You can go further, and you can grab here on the seam of the sleeve, and you can pull on that grip. Very good way to improve your grip. You go further up, and the further up on the torso you go, the more demanding it's going to be on your grip and your body position. So I pull at the elbows. I can mix my grip and go collar and elbow. These are the kind of things that we had to do when Sean and I were coming up through the ranks. These are the kind of warm-ups that they leave a bad taste in your mouth and you are loath to show them to other students, but in a time like this is probably a fine way to operate. But when I was coming up through the ranks, we would do this for many, many, many hours and then finally get into actual training. So these are things that you can do with a partner just wearing a gi. Holding far from the body, it's going to be pretty easy to pull on. Holding closer to the body, it's going to be harder to lift up on. If you pick up on someone's belt, that's probably the heaviest part of their body, the most demanding. Can everybody one more time? So Sean's lying down here, and I grab a hold of his belt, and I pull up on his hip. This is me literally picking up all of his body weight off the ground, and then dropping him very rudely on the floor. I didn't mean to do that, sorry, Sean. But that's another way you can work. If RJ Crespin was working with Jacob, and there was a size difference between them, I might try to pull on the belt to get a little bit more of a demanding exercise for your grip. But those are just some simple ideas. What's up? Oh yeah, but one of them is already quite strong. Were there any other questions on that?
That's it so far.
Okay, so why don't we take a moment now and look at closed guard position and just review some of the things that are happening there and what we want to be doing to open up a closed guard. Okay, we might not get too far into it today, but just like with the headquarters position, I want to at least introduce or review some of the ideas, and then in the coming days we'll get more into it. Okay, so if Sean has me in closed guard here, the main thing that I see people struggle with, especially when they first start out, is they want to open the guard from their knees. I'm just going to put this directly. You're not going to open a good person's guard from your knees. It will work up to a certain point, then it will stop working. And if you've made it a habit to open up someone's guard from your knees, then you go with somebody who's good and knows what they're doing, you're not going to open their guard from your knees. Okay? I know you want to think, but it's hard to stand up. And when I stand up, I get knocked down to the floor. That's fine. Okay? At first, when you go to stand up in somebody's guard, it's going to be tough to do. You're going to get knocked down a lot. Okay? But when you stand up and you get knocked backwards to the floor, that's inconsequential compared to the problems associated with being pulled forward. Okay? So if I'm here, and let's say my grip is off in some way, and Sean does a knee pull on me. Okay? He pulls me forward. This is a big, big problem for me. Okay? There's all kinds of submissions and very devastating sweeps that Sean can start to develop when he knee pulls me like this. Okay? If I were standing up and I got knocked backwards, that's fine. I can get back up, and even the best athletes in the world, they stand up, they sometimes will get knocked down, and then they recover. You will rarely, if ever, see somebody actually open up a good person's closed guard from a kneeling position. If this ever happens, it's almost always because he needs to go to an open guard to sweep me, maybe because of time regulations, things like this. But just bear in mind, it will be tough to learn to stand up in someone's closed guard. But you gotta learn how to do it at some point, and it becomes easier, obviously, as you practice it more. And overall, it's something where minutes spent here trying to open someone's closed guard, they're basically wasted minutes. Okay, just to put it bluntly. If I push here and I'm struggling and I can't open his closed guard, I shouldn't expect that to ever become different. As he gets better and better, this will become more and more dangerous for me to do. I've got to stand up in his guard in order to open it. Okay? If you here's a good example. If you go on and you watch the roll that I did with Jiva, I go in his close guard a couple of times, I stand up and I get swept or knocked over or something each time. That doesn't mean I'm gonna stop doing it. If I stayed like this, it would be even worse for me. It would have been way worse. I know you can't imagine that going any worse than it did if you saw that round, but imagine it got worse. This is one place it could have gotten a lot worse for me, is if I didn't try to stand up. Okay, so I'm preaching to you, stand up in their guard. There's lots of ways to do it. It's not easy at first, but you gotta learn it. Even though you're gonna get knocked down a lot, it's way better for you to have that happen than to get pulled forward into their close guard. If I'm in Sean's position, I would love it if the guy on top just stayed on his knees. Eventually I'll beat him. I would love it to be able to pull him forward with my legs, because I'll be able to beat him. But if he's tenacious and standing up and posturing and grip fighting me, that's a lot more to deal with for the person on bottom. Okay? So let's go over a couple of the fundamental things that are going on here. In general, when I'm in someone's close guard, this is one of the few times when I actually want to be aligned with him, center line to center line. In a close guard situation, I do not want Sean forming an angle on me like this, okay? Because now, if he knee pulls and goes to an angle at the same time, I get spilled forward, and this is where all the problems start, okay? So when we start off, we want to be center line to center line if we're on top in someone's close guard. Now, I generally recommend that you start by going into a support position, taking a lapel in each of your hands, pulling the slack out from behind their neck, and then turning your palms up and punching knuckles into the armpit, okay? This is a very good position for me to practice working on. It does a few things for me. One is it keeps his shoulders down and pinned to the floor, okay? A big problem for me is if Sean is able to sit up on me like this, okay? Now he's just a moment away from knocking me over with hip bump sweeps and things like this, okay? So one of my priorities is to keep his shoulders on the ground. We can do that in different ways. I have a support position now. Later on, we'll look at how we can do that with other forms of grip. But one of the first things I need to do is I need to keep his shoulders down on the ground. Now, at the same time that I'm doing that, I can never let my elbow get crossed against the center line. So this is why you'll never want to do this kind of thing. You should never, ever, under any circumstances, try to cross collar strangle somebody from inside their closed guard. You should not take a cross grip inside of somebody's closed guard, because now I've put myself in a very bad position. I've crossed my own elbow against the center line. So now my back is exposed, my arm is exposed. There's all kinds of problems that happens if I take a cross grip from here. I can take straight grips, that's fine. I can take double lapel grips, sleeve grip, pant grip, but never double pant grip, because now I haven't stopped him from sitting up. I also haven't stopped him from knee pulling me. If he knee pulls me now, I get spilled forward. I also don't want to grab double sleeve grip like this, because now when he knee pulls me, I get broken down, okay? So a good starting position is the support position. We take both lapels, we pull, turn the palms up, and I hide my knuckles here in his armpit. Okay, now when Sean goes to pull with his knees, my arms will brace against his knee pull. My bicep is being turned out and my armpit is pointing forward, okay? If my elbows point out to the side and Sean knee pulls, it's easy to break me down. What I want is that if my arm was going to bend, it would bend with my elbow pointing at my hip. So when Sean goes to pull me in, I can have a brace here. If he successfully breaks me down, my elbows are tucked in by his hip. So now when I back away from him and he tries to swim inside my arms, it's hard to do. There's not a lot of space for him to work with. If I have my elbows flared out to the side, it's easy for him to pommel in and create all kinds of problems. Okay, so this is a good starting position. I get the support position on him, he tries to knee pull me, and I stop him. The other thing he's gonna try to do is sit up on me, so I need to make sure I keep him pinned. Now, in this position, Sean is gonna be motivated to swim inside of my arms, and when he swims inside, now he can start being effective with his knee pull. He pulls me in with the legs and breaks me down. So the next grip that we work with is from a support position here. When I feel him trying to swim one of his arms under, I hide my two elbows to the side and I start bringing the two lapels towards each other. So I put two lapels in one hand. Now I haven't let go with my right hand. I've kept my hands close together. So now if Sean were to keep swimming inside, I slide back and I get a hold of his sleeve. Now with my thumb pointing out to the side here, my pinky pointing out to the other side, I'm gonna push my head back and away and I'm gonna take his sleeve and put it underneath my elbow and then I close that down so his arm is trapped. Now once I've got his arm trapped, it's safe for me to stand my foot up on that side here. As we're doing that, I'm gonna take my other knee and turn it in. So we get into a position where I can start to stand up. You can see my foot over here is turned into the side. Okay, so I've got a set of 90-degree angles in my legs. Okay, so our grips again. We're in a position where we're fighting for the closed guard, or more or less center line to center line. I need to stop him from sitting up, and I need to stop him from knee pulling me. So as we get into this hand fight, he goes ahead and knee pulls me, tries to sit up, and I brace against him. I get a support grip on one side and the other. I pull the slack out of his lapels, and I put my knuckles here in his armpit. Now when he goes to pull me in, I make sure to brace. He goes to swim inside my arms, and I block him out. As he's going to swim inside, I'm alert to him trying to pull my head down. If he tries to pull my head down, I back away from him. He goes back to swimming inside, and I shut him out of that. Now I can stand up from this position and open his guard. Alternatively, if he's swimming inside, I put the two lapels close together and I gather them up with one hand. Now my hands are still connected to his lapel, but as he goes to swim inside, I'm gonna find his sleeve, pull my head back and away, and punch his hand underneath my own arm. Now I lock up the lapels, I lock up the sleeve, so now when I go to step up on this side, he's not gonna be able to grab onto my leg. Okay, so I've got control of the sleeve, I start stepping up, and I get into a position ready to actually posture up and get and open up his guard. In general, when you go to stand up, you're aiming to get into vertical posture, but as you stand up on your partner, you're gonna have to get your head right over your hands. So I'm not vertical right now, I'm not trying to move away like this. If I do this right now, not only is it possible for Sean to knee pull me, but I have no contact, no actual physical contact, so when he knee pulls on me and I brace, now he can make a second move and go on the attack. So as I'm in the process of standing up, my head is over my hands. I've taken one step here with my right leg. I take a second step up with my left leg, and then I square myself up to him here, and I start to posture all the way up and away. I put my elbow inside his knee, then I move my head towards that side. I push down on his opposite knee, and I knee drop here. Once I'm in this knee drop, I'm in a good defensive position, and we've covered this over the last few days. What we can do from this knee drop, because I've got control of this sleeve here, Sean is probably going to accept putting his hand on my shoulder as a frame like this. Okay, no problem. I've got the knee drop position. I just start bringing my knee down through to the floor, and then we're in the position that we've been covering over the last few days. If he continues to frame on me, I might go forward and pass his half guard. That's a very good option. I might alternatively go back and away from him and start to clear his legs and attack from the outside position. Okay, but of course this is all things that we've covered over the last, how long has it been? 400 days now, 2 weeks, something like that. But the big idea here is when you open up somebody's guard, you're probably going to land in a knee drop. Okay? I've just been informed that we have some number of minutes left, 1 or 2. Why don't we pause right now? I'll come back, we'll re-stream. I'm gonna review this one more time, and then we'll call it an evening. Okay? So hang on for 1 second, just rejoin the live stream, and we'll be right back.